Perfecto, gracias. Muy bien, muy buenas tardes. Gracias de nuevo por continuar atendiendo el llamado al desarrollo de la agenda de este segundo día en esta cumbre del clima latinoamericana. Bien, los estados subnacionales están desempeñando un papel cada vez más activo en el desarrollo de los mercados de carbono. Actualmente, 7 estados subnacionales en México tienen un impuesto de carbono y 3 de ellos permiten o están trabajando para habilitar el uso de compensaciones. Varios estados en Brasil tienen programas de pago por resultados jurisdiccionales e incluso están evaluando modelos innovadores como las concesiones forestales para los mercados de carbono. Les estoy hablando de esto porque ha llegado el momento de la segunda plenaria. La acción climática más allá de los gobiernos centrales, el papel activo de los gobiernos subnacionales en los mercados de carbono. Los dejo entonces con Katie Sullivan, directora general de IETA. Bienvenida.
Thank you, gracias. Thank you so much, Danielle. Hi, everyone. What a treat to be here in Cartagena. So, Katie Sullivan, International Emissions Trading Association, and have a wonderful team, obviously, with IETA. And we have an incredible partnership with Asocarbono. So, before I introduce the rest of the panelists here today, I just want to give a heartfelt shout out to our partners at Asocarbono for working with us over the years, including pulling together this remarkable forum here in Cartagena with this absolutely gorgeous. So special thanks to Francisco and Anna. Thank you. Okay, so let's get on to this incredible session. I'm really excited and extremely honored to be the moderator to look at subnational action, so going beyond the capitals, national centers, and really focusing in on all of the activity on carbon markets and finance and cooperation across states and provinces in the region. And trust me, there is a lot going on and a lot that is evolving. So if I could just welcome on stage all of the panelists. Stefano, we'll save you for last. And we'll have Eduardo Piquero, Director General, Mexico CO2, Mexico Dos. Sebastian Navarro, Secretary General, CC35. We have Beatriz Narita, Coordinator of Partnerships and Sectoral Chambers, the Consortium of Amazon States, and Philippe Gregoire, Climate Change Advisor at Quebec Government and Carbon Pricing in the Americas. And last but not least, we're saving Stefano De Clara from ICAP because Stefano has an overview scene setter presentation from the great work that they do at the International Carbon Action Partnership to showcase what is happening in the region and getting us started. So you have some presentations and I'll pass it to you, Stefano.
Thanks, Katie. And I'll really just be giving a quick scene setting presentation to set the scene and give you a sense of the state of play in subnational action on carbon markets and carbon pricing, but then I'll keep it brief and I'll make sure to leave plenty of time for discussion with the stellar panel. So first things first, let's agree on what we are talking about. And we all know that we do have different carbon pricing instruments, right? And when we talk about carbon pricing and when it comes to implementing carbon pricing in terms of concrete instruments, we can have carbon taxes or we can have carbon market instruments. Carbon market instruments can be divided between voluntary and compliance markets, and under compliance markets you can find offsetting schemes or emission trading systems which can be absolute or intensity based in nature. This is just to say that if you look at the global state of play, but also if you look at LATAM more closely, you will find all of these instruments implemented in different jurisdictions, and typically you can find all of these instruments implemented at different levels of governance. And when it comes to subnational jurisdictions, they play a key role, and they are often at the forefront of implementing all of these instruments under the carbon pricing landscape. we'll delve now into some examples, and again, I'll give you a bit of a sense of where we are globally. I'll end on a quick note on LATAM, but then the panel will dissect some of the key trends in LATAM more closely. So what you have on the slide here is a global map for compliance carbon pricing. It comes from the World Bank State and Trends report, and it gives you a sense of, I mean, first of all, the reach of compliance carbon pricing globally, but also, if you look at it a bit more closely, you can also see how carbon pricing and compliance carbon pricing instruments can be implemented at different levels of governance, right? I mean, we have regional systems such as the EU ETS. We have a lot of systems that are implemented at the national level, but we do also have a significant number of carbon pricing policies implemented in subnational jurisdictions. And if you look at Latin America, you will see that we have a lot of interesting examples there. And again, the panel will delve into that a bit more. Moving to a second, or to a different part of the carbon pricing landscape, we also find governmental carbon crediting mechanisms implemented at different levels of governance. Again, this slide comes from the same World Bank report and shows the state of play for government-run and government-operated carbon crediting mechanisms. And again, if you zoom into the Americas, and here we have a lot of examples from North America, for example, you will find crediting mechanisms established both at the national, but also at the subnational level. And again, it gives you a sense of the different levels of governance at which these mechanisms can be implemented. Now, if we zoom in a bit further on compliance emission trading systems, which is what ICAP focuses on specifically, again, you will find examples of emission trading systems implemented at many different levels of governance, all the way from regional systems to national systems, but further down also to subnational and even city-level emission trading systems in different continents. And just to give you a sense of to what extent subnationals play a role in the emission trading system landscape, on this slide here we have grouped the different jurisdictions that implement emission trading systems, and as you can see, you actually have more subnational, so cities, provinces, and states that implement emission trading systems compared to national entities. And again, this gives you a sense of how in almost all continents and all regions, there's a lot of subnational action on the implementation of emission trading systems. And ending with a quick note on LACs, and again, the panel will delve into it more in detail. We try to put on the previous slide that shows the carbon pricing landscape a bit of the state of play when it comes to LATAM. So as you can see, in the continent, you have almost every form of carbon pricing mechanisms implemented, and you also find these implemented at different levels of governance. It's quite interesting if you look at carbon taxes, for example, and I think Eduardo will be talking to that in a second, but especially in Mexico, you find a lot of subnational action on the implementation of carbon taxes, but this is also true for compliance emission trading systems, for example. Philippe will, I guess, will be talking about this in a second, but in Quebec and in many other Canadian provinces, you do find subnational emission trading systems. That is also the case in many states in the US. And more broadly, you can get a sense of how, again, action on the implementation of different forms of carbon pricing mechanisms really transcends different levels of governance, and often subnationals are at the forefront of this implementation. There are really good reasons for that, but the panel will get into that in a second. So with that, the floor goes back to Katie, and I'm looking forward to hearing the panel discussion.
Hello. Thank you, Stefano. I might actually have to leave you.
Sebastian, I think I have to go up because I need to see my, I don't, I can't see my, okay, I was thinking about going to the podium instead. Is that, but no, I can see your face. That's good. All right. Stefano De Clara, thank you so much. You're always such a star at going through, taking us through the journey of all of these carbon pricing, emissions trading activities that are cropping up around the world. We love maps in this space. And I'm going to preempt questions, at least from the audience later. Will your slides be made available after the event? Okay, that's great. So, and I assume that goes for the other slides for my speakers today. So the slides, you're welcome to take snapshots of them, but know that you will receive some of these slides after today's event. All right, so let's get into the meat with that scene setter. We're going to first go to Mexico. So like I said, Eduardo Piquero has been in our space, my gosh, over 20 years? Almost 20, because well, me too. So a long time, started when we were very young. And Eduardo is first, Mexico's CO2's reach goes beyond Mexico, but as you can imagine, they're very much concentrated, a lot of activity in Mexico, nationally, and at that subnational level. And there's a lot of innovation that has been occurring in Mexico, but there also has been a national election recently. So I'd like to start, just get it out there, with the incoming president. What are expectations in Mexico broadly for climate action, and then specifically on carbon pricing nationally, the outlooks that you see or expectations we should watch, including how we might see the ETS nationally occur or not. And then let's touch on some of the state level activities. And Eduardo does have slides. Slide number 2, but you can start off with that.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you very much, and yeah, well, thank you always for your support and for giving us the space. AIDA's support for Mexico CO2 has been crucial, and for Mexico for the growth of both voluntary and compliance markets. And I can't stress enough how much work from AIDA has been directed to Mexico. Now it's finally moving forward thanks to you mostly. So I'm very happy to be here in Gabriel Garcia Marquez town, and very dear to all Latin Americans. Let me tell you that yes, we've just had elections in Mexico together with the presidency, the Senate, the Chamber of Deputies, and several states were also elected. And gracias. And yes, we have the first woman president in Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum. She is actually she was part of the IPCC a long time ago, longer than we were in carbon markets. So that was quite a long time ago. And she's actually a friend of friends who've worked in carbon markets, and she had a landslide election. She has both the Chamber of Deputies and the Senate able to make any changes or to pass any laws she'd like. So that even changing the constitution, that allows you in Mexico to change the constitution. And as of today, we have no announcements or intentions that she will pursue that. And last week, we had the first appointments for her for her cabinet. And the appointment for the Ministry of Environment is happily Alicia Bárcenas, who was the head of ECLAC, in Spanish CEPAL, extremely well known throughout Latin America, who had also served as Undersecretary for the Environment long time ago, longer than we were in carbon markets. That was a lot. and very well into carbon markets. And as a matter of fact, part of her team in ECLAC developed several reports on the cost of social carbon and on carbon markets for Latin America, and we're pretty sure that a large portion of her team will join her in the Ministry of Environment. So I'm finally positive about the way things will turn for the Mexican ETS in the forthcoming years. However, let me tell you that we have lost so much time. We've lost not only time, but capacities in the Ministry of Environment, in the private sector, and in many other institutions to make the ETS work. And it will take at least 2 or 3 years to rebuild its capacities and have finally the ETS moving forward. In the meantime, we need to work with whoever wants to move forward in carbon markets. And subnationals are gaining more and more space, not only in Mexico, but in other countries in Latin America, but mostly in Mexico. And 8 different, let me show you this. This is the first slide. 8 different states in Mexico do have a price on carbon. And many of them, at least 3 or 4, they do have a compensation mechanism, meaning that you can pay that tax using offsets. The most important of these states, it's of course our dear state of Querétaro, which is able the companies are able to pay the tax, the carbon tax, using Querétaro, Mexico's or international offsets, once they are allowed. And let me recognize the president here of the Under Ministry of Environment, Ricardo Torres from Querétaro. That it's over there. Hi, Ricardo. And following what is going on in Querétaro, many other states are playing exactly the same game, including the state of Guanajuato, which intentions are to make its own carbon tax also paid using offsets. So we're going to make your map, Stefano, more and more complex. Once we're gonna need a loop in Mexico now, a zoom in Mexico, and the state of Yucatan, which will change government. We will switch parties, and let's see what's going on during the next administration. The state of Tamaulipas, up in the north, that big one. It's it's Latin America's largest petrochemical facility. And it also enacted a carbon tax and will demand not only allow, but will demand that part of the tax will be covered using Mexican offsets. Many other states will follow through. At least 3 other different states are also developing carbon taxes in Mexico. Due to the election, many laws or announcements cannot be made, but at least 3 other states here will also join the club. One of them that is not included here is the state of Jalisco. You all know Jalisco. Jalisco is where tequila is from. With the yellow or orange state over there, which also changed governments but didn't change parties. And let's see what happens with their carbon tax initiative during the next few months. And these also are the prices for the different states. They have different prices. It's not the only thing moving forward in subnationals outside Mexico. Let me tell you that in my home country, in Argentina, the province of Córdoba, Argentina's second largest economy, it's exploring carbon pricing and has commissioned a number of studies to select its best way to promote emission reductions and compensations, specifically in the province of Córdoba. Let's see what happens in this quite important economy in terms of agro-industrial facilities and very large also industrial companies outside Buenos Aires. I'm pretty sure that we will see something before the end of the year in this province. And besides subnationals, some other small jurisdictions are either pushing or already announcing that they're moving forward with some other pricing mechanism. One of them being the Dominican Republic, that has made also public that it will start its pilot ETS, if everything goes okay, during 2025. Yes, 2025. And regulation will be out soon. So we expect this to happen really very, very soon. This would be the first ETS to be operational in Latin America. Let's see what happens. I'm betting that it is the case. the Dominican Republic is a very active and very important economy. It's grown a lot in terms of emissions during the last 3 or 4 decades. And it's very important not only because of its touristic industry, but also because it's also becoming a more export-oriented economy. And several large facilities, large emitters are emitting more and more. So all in all, the landscape in Latin America, though we don't have a lot of action at the national level from the large economies, we will see more coming through because it's easier for smaller economies, because it's technically easier also for provinces or states to move forward with carbon taxes, and it's faster. And let me stress you something. It's because subnationals are closer to the problem and they need money. So we will see more of these coming forward. I wouldn't say that Colombia or Peru or Chile might not be the case to imitate this in the forthcoming years, though the large federations or federal entities in Latin America are already under that. So we will also expect that happening from Brazil if the ETS is not going on in the next couple of years.
That it's always just so rich, the information that you provide. And maybe, well, we can, I just want to emphasize, like, the prices that you see in Mexico are really quite stunning, some of them. Which one was the $17?
We have 3 at 17, I think. I don't know.
It's
no longer there, but
okay.
We have the states of Tamaulipas, San Luis Potosí, and Durango in close to 16, 17, and we have the highest price of carbon in the Americas.
I know. Querétaro.
Correct.
Over $30 US. And I mean, when you look at that, you're getting close to, well, even our friends in Quebec, California, right? I mean, these are not low prices, relatively speaking. So thank you very much. And the reason when you brought Cordoba up, our friend here, Sebastian at CC35, is like, oh yeah, I'm friends with the leader of Cordoba. Because Sebastian's friends with many of the local city and subnational leaders across the region. And I'll let Sebastian tell you more about CC35, which really came out of this during COVID, essentially gave birth to this incredible initiative, representing some 35 local city mayors and regions. So, Sebastian, why don't you tell the group a bit more about, obviously, just the mission, so we're clear about CC35, and then get into, clearly, the topic on subnational action or outlooks that you're seeing around carbon markets specifically.
Thank you, Katie. Katie's come to Cartagena. She trying to speak Spanish. When? Thank you, Yeta, Katie, for your human quality, the first quality. And Azocarbono, Francisco y Ana María, que hicieron un trabajo impresionante, y lo vienen haciendo hace bastante tiempo. Voy a hablar en español, estamos en Cartagena. Vamos, orgulloso de hablar español, además. Okay. Oh, you understand. Katie tiene que aprender sus clases de español, vamos a ayudar. Bueno, el CC35 es la última organización climática de ciudades, trabaja con las capitales de los países del hemisferio. Nacimos con una pequeña ambición de unir a este continente a través de la agenda climática y de la diplomacia local, así que tenemos ambiciones bastante grandes. Un continente que tendría que trabajar unido hace mucho tiempo. Así que lo que hacemos es trabajar con las ciudades, recomendar su legislación, recomendar sus estrategias de financiamiento, de comunicación y diplomacia, esa unión diplomática entre todas las ciudades. En cuanto a los mercados, Katie, en Latinoamérica, coincido un poco reforzando lo que decía Eduardo, que Eduardo ya creo que es la persona que más sabe de mercados subnacionales en en el continente. Es un nicho muy especial, los mercados subnacionales. Generalmente todo el mundo está mirando lo que hacen los gobiernos nacionales. Yo recomendaría dejar de seguirlos porque no vienen haciendo muy bien las cosas los gobiernos nacionales. Hace 29 años que estamos incumpliendo todos los acuerdos el Acuerdo de París, así que creo que tenemos que empezar a dar más fuerza a los gobiernos nacionales, subnacionales. Perdón. En términos de mercado, como decía Eduardo, hoy es mucho más fácil generar estrategias y políticas de mercados de carbono en provincias, departamentos, estados, y además hay un tema fundamental. Las constituciones nacionales de Argentina, de Brasil, de Colombia, de México, la potestad de los recursos naturales son de las provincias, son de los estados. O sea que además hay una barrera constitucional para que los gobiernos nacionales no se queden con el carbono que está dentro de los recursos naturales de los gobiernos subnacionales. Las ciudades también lo tienen, Katie. Por ejemplo, Quito tiene 51% de áreas protegidas urbanas. Es un caso impresionante. ¿Cuánto carbono hay ahí para negociar, para traer recursos a un gobierno subnacional? Así que en ese sentido creo que hay hoy un liderazgo mayor de los gobernadores, sobre todo los gobernadores que tienen ese poder de poder armar sus propios mercados de carbono a nivel subnacional. Creo que hay un liderazgo mucho mayor, lo están empezando a ver. Yo creo que con la COP de Brasil que viene ahora va a empezar a pasar con muchos estados de Brasil también. Y creo que hay una oportunidad, como lo hablábamos antes, Katie, antes de empezar acá, incluso en las ciudades tienen todo el poder regulatorio para la descarbonización, por ejemplo, ¿no? O sea, los permisos de construcción están en manos de las ciudades, la movilidad, los residuos. En el caso, Colombia tiene un caso espectacular que es Barranquilla, que está esperando la firma del gobierno nacional para tener su primera planta de energía mixta en control del gobierno municipal. O sea que si las ciudades manejan todas esas potestades, hoy tienen casi la torta de descarbonización completa en sus manos. Y eso no tiene que ver con los gobiernos nacionales mayoritariamente. Así que creo que hay una oportunidad, está creciendo mucho, y no nos olvidemos que el mercado de carbono nació bajo el liderazgo subnacional de California y de Alberta, y creo que tenemos que seguir, y fue uno de los mercados más exitosos del mundo. Entonces creo que hay que volver a las bases de los gobiernos subnacionales.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. You were saying earlier how, again, many moons ago, when I my very first boss came into my office, and he had had a long day, but he had been in this space for many years, climate change action broadly. And he said, Katie, forget international, forget the national, regional. He's like, the action, it takes place at the subnational, the city level. If you want like action relatively near term before you retire, he said. And then I went to work with AIDA. And so we get to see all of it. But it really is true. And you are, I think with CC35 still being relatively nascent, like a younger, say, initiative, but the growth and the impact that you have had. And we'll circle back to some of the actual tangible announcements that have recently been made by CC35 and the deeper integration that's occurring. But first, let's go to Beatriz. So we'll go Brazil. You said, COP's around the corner, a big COP. Baku, important. Belém, Brazil, COP30 next year, extremely important for the international community. So we're going to you, Beatriz. So at the consortium, Amazonas, you also have slides. So if we could put Beatriz's slides up and tell us, and we have deepened, excellent, thank you. AIDA has deepened our partnership with thanks to also my AIDA colleague, Pedro, our partnerships with you quite closely, and you've become an extremely critical partner in the region. So tell us more about the consortium and your priorities, including around the carbon markets piece and working with communities. And you're speaking in Portuguese.
Muito obrigada, Kate. Primeiro, eu gostaria de agradecer a IETA pelo convite para participar desse evento com um público tão qualificado. Para mim é uma honra estar aqui com vocês. Eu vou explicar um pouquinho o que é o Consórcio Interestadual de Desenvolvimento Sustentável da Amazônia Legal, que a gente chama só de Consórcio Amazônia Legal, porque o nome é bem grande, e contextualizar um pouco o trabalho que a gente tem desenvolvido para depois chegar ao ponto que nos trouxe aqui hoje. O consórcio é uma autarquia pública, ele é um órgão público ligado à administração dos 9 estados brasileiros que compõem a região da Amazônia Legal. Por força de lei, a região dos estados da Amazônia se chama Amazônia Legal. Ela foi uma iniciativa dos governadores na tentativa de dentro para fora, promover o desenvolvimento regional sustentável. A gente tem que levar em consideração que a Amazônia Legal ocupa quase 60% do território nacional, tem quase 30 milhões de habitantes que vivem majoritariamente nas cidades que estão espalhadas, né, pelos estados, pelos 9 estados, e a gente tem um grande desafio que é conseguir promover o desenvolvimento social sustentável, enquanto a gente mantém também a floresta em pé. Os 30 milhões de habitantes que estão espalhados, né, pela região da Amazônia, eles fazem com que também a taxa de arrecadação dos estados em termos fiscais seja muito baixa. Então, a gente tem esse desafio de como conseguir recursos para os estados para conseguir fazer essa promoção do desenvolvimento social, desenvolvimento econômico e, ao mesmo tempo, manter a floresta em pé. E aí eu entro no tópico que nos trouxe aqui hoje, né, que é o estado atual da arte dos estados em relação aos sistemas jurisdicionais de RED+. Bom, primeiro eu queria pontuar que os estados da Amazônia brasileira, eles têm sido pioneiros em várias questões relacionadas a meio ambiente e clima. Eu descobri recentemente uma gravidez e eu, às vezes, sinto alguns sintomas, então eu vou pedir perdão para vocês.
You take your time. Take your time. Look, so Para, that's where Belém is. So that's where many of us are going next year for COP. If you're going to COP 30, we're going to Para, right there in the middle. Okay.
Eu esqueci de contextualizar que a nossa instância máxima dentro do consórcio é a Assembleia Geral de Governadores. Ela é composta pelos governadores dos 9 estados e, atualmente, o nosso presidente é o governador Helder Barbalho, que será o anfitrião da COP30. Estamos todos muito ansiosos por recebê-los lá em Belém do Pará. Nós temos a Secretaria Executiva do consórcio, que é responsável por endereçar todas as demandas comuns dos governadores em relação ao desenvolvimento regional sustentável. E aí eu também tinha esquecido de mencionar a parte do meu trabalho, que é de coordenar as câmaras setoriais do consórcio que endereçam essas demandas dos governadores. Meio ambiente, que é onde estão reunidos os nossos secretários de meio ambiente, é apenas uma das câmaras setoriais com as quais eu trabalho. A gente também lida com os secretários de Estado de Segurança Pública, Educação, Planejamento, Saúde, Fazenda, Cultura, Regularização Fundiária, enfim, são 10 câmaras setoriais diferentes para tentar endereçar todas as demandas dos governadores. Em relação à de meio ambiente, nós temos hoje 2 grandes assuntos sendo desenvolvidos. Primeiro, é uma estratégia regional de cooperação para a prevenção de desmatamento e queimadas. Se não tivesse sido os esforços dos governos subnacionais durante os últimos anos, a questão de desmatamento e queimadas na Amazônia brasileira teria sido bem mais intensa. Então, o trabalho que os estados têm feito é de bastante valia e também a gente trabalha com os estados em relação a questões relacionadas a pagamento por serviços ambientais e mercado de carbono de uma forma geral. Em relação à questão do pioneirismo dos estados da Amazônia, em razão do tamanho da floresta e da importância que as comunidades locais e a população local dá para a floresta, os estados da Amazônia têm uma tradição de pioneirismo em... Obrigada. Os estados da Amazônia têm uma tradição de pioneirismo em vários assuntos relacionados a meio ambiente e clima. Os estados do Amazonas, Amapá e Tocantins, por exemplo, criaram seus planos estaduais de mudança climática alguns anos antes do próprio governo federal ter criado a Política Nacional de Mudança do Clima. Depois, os outros estados também foram acompanhando essa implementação de suas políticas estaduais. Hoje, todos os estados têm suas políticas e suas ações estaduais para questões relacionadas à mudança do clima. E a gente pode dizer que essa experiência dos estados também foi utilizada como inspiração para o próprio governo federal na criação da sua política nacional. Os estados, por exemplo, do Acre, o Acre é pioneiro no programa de RED, o RED for Early Movers. O Acre completou um pouco mais de 10 anos agora. E ele foi criado antes mesmo de a Comissão Nacional de RED+, do Brasil ter sido implementada. O Acre é o estado que fica bem ali no cantinho, vizinho da Bolívia. Na sequência, também temos o estado do Mato Grosso, que também teve o seu programa REN. Semana passada, eles estavam justamente realizando um evento junto com a cooperação alemã para comemorar esses mais de 10 anos do programa REN. E uma das questões que foi pontuada é como... Porque o programa REN dos estados do Acre e do Mato Grosso foram pagamento por resultado e de doação. E eles agora estão estruturando outra fase para conseguir entrar no mercado voluntário, numa forma também muito importante para os estados de obter mais recursos para as ações relacionadas a comando e controle, preservação da floresta e promoção de alternativas sustentáveis produtivas para a população. Então, hoje, os estados do Acre e do Mato Grosso estão bastante avançados nesse assunto. O estado do Mato Grosso, por exemplo, é um grande exportador de commodity. Para eles, essas ações também são muito importantes e eles têm lá no estado a estratégia Produzir, Conservar e Incluir, que é uma tentativa de trazer também um pouco do agronegócio para dentro das discussões ambientais, acreditando que não existe essa diferença. Não precisam ser questões antagônicas. E o Instituto PCI, eles têm trabalhado na instituição de uma legislação que vai criar uma empresa que vai conseguir gerenciar esses créditos que são gerados dentro do estado do Mato Grosso. O estado do Pará também tem uma iniciativa semelhante. Eles lançaram ano passado a legislação que instituiu a companhia estadual, que vai também fazer a transação desses créditos. Nós temos o exemplo do estado do Amazonas, que está fazendo um modelo um pouco híbrido, né? Eles abriram um edital ano passado para estabelecer concessões florestais. Eles estabeleceram, na verdade, um edital abrindo a possibilidade que desenvolvedores de projetos privados interessados em atuar nas unidades de conservação do Estado pudessem se inscrever para poder gerenciar os créditos que são produzidos dentro das áreas estaduais. E o estado do Tocantins, ano passado, há alguns anos, instituíram já eles têm uma companhia estadual que pode transacionar créditos no mercado voluntário. E, ano passado, eles já estabeleceram um primeiro acordo junto com a Mercúria para poder receber recursos para preparar, na verdade, a estruturação, né, para atender algumas salvaguardas socioambientais. E daqui a 10 anos, quando eles performarem, a Mercúria tem direito de preferência nas compras dos créditos. Os estados, eles nem todos têm o mesmo nível de maturidade, porque isso depende muito da capacidade do estado de conseguir ter servidores qualificados, de manter esses servidores ativos nos estados, de os gestores, né, tanto os secretários quanto os governadores, comprarem politicamente a ideia e implementarem Então, acaba sendo um pouco desafiador a gente trabalhar de forma unificada com todos os estados, mas todos eles, de alguma forma, têm trabalhado na estruturação de seus sistemas.
Okay. First, can I please get a round of applause for Beatrice? Who just found out you're pregnant, still comes to Columbia, very eloquently just went through quite a comprehensive, detailed update for each of those states, which are doing a lot. Like, that reminds me, I'm from Canada, and so when somebody says, Katie, explain every provincial program and all the different activities, including how fragmented it is, which we can talk about that later. And it's like, oh my gosh, covering all the different evolutions of just markets and the financing, the policy and the governance, right? But you look at Para and you look at Acre and Mato Grosso, right? That is the home of a lot of innovation that has occurred in red, a lot. So it's just interesting to see a map like that and very clearly explain, where things are. So, and just thank you for being here. And I filled up, you have water, okay. So, are you pregnant, Philippe? Okay. Just checking. I can say that. Philippe and I know each other very well. Fellow Canadian, Quebecois, Quebec government. You're welcome to speak French, but I don't think... No? Okay. I understand French. So first of all, let's talk about Quebec's cap-and-trade system. All right? You had mentioned it. Eduardo mentioned it. When you look, many, not all, but many jurisdictions in Latin America, when they look to develop their carbon market emissions trading system, they're looking to who could our club partners be? Who should we be looking to emulate? Maybe not perfectly, but at least certain elements of the design of our system should be similar to Quebec, California. And also Quebec, 11 years, you've now had a cap and trade system, so the older kid on the block, right? No, 11 years and then 10 years linkage with California. So tell us just a bit about the wins with respect to that program that you have and some of the changes that you're doing to that. And then we'll get into CPA.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Katie, for the invitation. And Aita, too. It's really appreciated to be on stage here with you. If you don't mind, I will switch in Spanish now because we are in Colombia. So, entonces, como Katie acaba de decirlo, hace 11 años que tenemos un mercado de carbono en Quebec, el sistema de comercio de emisiones, y hace 10 años que estamos vinculados con California. Tenemos un enfoque integrado. El sistema de comercio de emisiones genera ingresos que se reinvierten en la lucha contra el cambio climático a través del Fondo de Electrificación y Cambio Climático, que llamamos FEC. El sistema de comercio de emisión induce reducciones en los sectores cubiertos, mientras que el FEC es complementario al fomentar reducciones en otros sectores de actividad. Tenemos también una metodología de contabilización de los flujos netos entre estados subnacionales, que es precursora de la aplicación del artículo 6 del Acuerdo de París sobre los ritmos. Tenemos también, logramos nuestro objetivo de reducción de gases de efecto invernadero en 2020, que era de menos 20% en comparación de 1990. Logramos reducir de menos 26.6%, que son reducciones inducidas por el enfoque integrado y el comercio interjurisdiccional con California de emisiones. Tenemos también consignación de unidades de emisión, que es un método innovador para reducir la cantidad de unidades de emisión pagadas gratuitamente y animar a los emisores a invertir en la reducción de sus emisiones. Estos son los 4 logros grandes que tenemos y ahorita estamos evaluando los parámetros, justamente como estamos celebrando 10 años de vinculación con California. Queremos que el mercado sea más eficaz, entonces tenemos 4 cambios que estamos evaluando. Es primero de la retirada de unidades de emisión. Desde el anuncio con California en 2014, las emisiones de gases a efecto invernadero han estado por debajo de los topes anuales de derecho de emisión. con el resultado de que los derechos de emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero se han acumulado en el mercado. Dado que los derechos de emisión puedan acumularse para su uso futuro, los topes anuales de derechos de emisión de gases de efecto invernadero ya no pueden garantizar la consecución del nivel deseado de reducción que sea coherente con los objetivos de 2030 para los sectores de actividad objetivo. Tenemos una meta de menos 37.5% por 2030. Quebec y California entonces pueden o bien reducir el número de unidades de emisión puesta a la venta en los próximos años, o bien aumentar la demanda de unidades de emisión, reducción de uso de créditos de compensación. ¿Qué es el número 2? Entonces, estamos evaluando también los créditos de compensación. Tenemos 3 diferentes opciones que estamos evaluando. O sea, de reducir el límite de uso de créditos de compensación para animar a los emisores regulados a reducir las emisiones en sus propias instalaciones y aumentar las reducciones en los sectores cubiertos por el régimen de comercio de derechos de emisión. También restringir el uso total o parcialmente a los proyectos con beneficios medioambientales directos en Quebec. En inglés lo llama DEBs, lo utilizan también en California. Es que en Quebec solo hacemos proyectos de créditos de compensación en la provincia de Quebec. En California se puede hacer en todo Estados Unidos. Entonces, ¿por qué estamos evaluando esta opción? Es para que haya más inversión en los proyectos de crédito de compensación en la provincia de Quebec, como creo que es 95% de los créditos de compensación que vienen de California por el momento. También la tercera opción es la posibilidad de convertir el componente de crédito de compensación en un programa de compra de reducciones de gases de efecto invernadero y absorciones de CO2. Eso sería a partir de 2030 que pensamos poner eso en lugar. Los 2 objetivos de esta evaluación de los de créditos de compensación es garantizar que los proyectos realizados en Quebec contribuyan directamente a la consecución del objetivo y de fomentar el establecimiento de un precio acorde con el coste de ejecución de los proyectos de reducción y retirada. También estamos evaluando el mecanismo de control de precios y mecanismo de control de mercado. Eso es para mejorar los mecanismos de control de precios, o sea, un precio mínimo y precio de reserva de mercado, límites de compra y posesión para mantener su eficacia. Y finalmente estamos evaluando también el periodo de cumplimiento, o sea, de modificar los periodos de cumplimiento para alinearnos con los años objetivos de reducción de emisiones de gases a efecto invernadero. Por ejemplo, para nosotros, la próxima meta es 2030.
Did you catch all that? A lot. See, this is what many of my members, AIDA, when we have our working group meetings for California and Quebec, all of those details that you're nailing down that are quite significant, could be quite significant, watching closely. So this is a very important year for Quebec and California, looking through some pretty significant changes to their cap and trade system. So businesses are watching very closely, okay? I won't go into details, but it is, I wanted to make it clear, thank you very much for just all the design elements, which are laid out clearly in one of, ICAP bulletins, but also, that's why people probably like, this is a disconnect, what's with the slide? So Quebec is also really a leader on the, go back to that slide, please. Carbon pricing, thank you, gracias. So carbon pricing in the Americas Declaration. So Philippe, you have played obviously an instrumental role as well, but with partners in the CPA, and I see Juan Pedro here from Chile. So tell the group about just CPA, high level, the key resources, the membership, but also you are looking to broaden the membership of this important initiative.
Thank you very much to have the opportunity to talk a little bit more about the CPA. Entonces, lo que no conocen a CPA, estamos en una plataforma como un foro de discusiones entre subnacionales y nacionales. Estamos 17 miembros. Hay 5 estados de México que están parte de eso y además la Semarnat. Y también esta mañana había un panel con Canadá, Chile, Colombia y Panamá. Creo que no me todo, sí. Están todos partes de CPA también. Está copresenté por 2 copresentantes, uno de Norteamérica, que es Jean-Yves Benoit de Quebec, y otro de Panamá, que es Javier Martínez, que representa América Latina y el Caribe. Entonces, es más que todo un foro informal para compartir experiencias entre los países que tienen precios de carbono, están interesados en implementar precios de carbono. Estamos también apoyados por diferentes organismos especializados en precios de carbono, como AITA, ICAP, el Banco Mundial y CLAC. Estamos como 10 organizaciones que apoyan a CPA. También el año pasado se lanzó el sitio web que se puede acceder ahorita con el código QR si quieren acceder, y se ve aquí en la pantalla la página principal. Como estamos justamente una reunión de diferentes naciones y subnacionales de toda América, el sitio web está disponible en 4 idiomas, entonces inglés, francés, español y portugués. Y se puede ver diferentes eventos en el sitio web que se pasan en las Américas. Este evento ahorita está publicado en esta página web. También tenemos nuestro nuevo logo que creamos el año pasado, que fue votado por los diferentes miembros. Entonces, también en 2022 tuvimos realmente nuestra primera reunión general, que fue en 2022 en Río, en conjunto con el Latin American Climate Summit. Gracias por AITA. Y el año pasado fui en Querétaro, en México, gracias a México CO2, que fue también un gran suceso. Y este año tenemos planificado hacer un taller de capacitación técnica en Santiago de Chile, del 22 al 26 de julio, con el gran apoyo de CEPAL, por suceder el financiamiento por los miembros y el apoyo técnico. RCC Latin America Regional Collaboration Center, que se junta con nosotros para hacer su evento ReadyCap. Entonces, llevan todos sus miembros de América Latina también que van a estar presentes en esta capacitación técnica. Toda América Latina va a estar representando más 2 o 3 países del Caribe que están invitados por parte de CEPAL. Y también ICAP va a dar parte de la capacitación técnica, el Banco Mundial, CICAP, GIZ México, GCPC. Espero que no olviden a nadie, estamos muchos ahí, estamos 64 en la sala y está lleno. Hasta hay delegaciones que van a tener que hacer rotación para estar presentes durante el evento. Y también por la Secretaría, por el momento es Panamá y Quebec que asumen la Secretaría. Estamos 2 en Quebec y 2 en Panamá que hacemos todas las actividades, pero buscamos una Secretaría permanente. Y este año es muy probable que tenemos buenas noticias por eso y se puede como ver en las próximas semanas o meses, creo que vamos a tener buenas noticias. Y como habló un poco Katie, porque este foro existe para fomentar las discusiones y intercambio de experiencia entre las jurisdicciones, apoyado por la experiencia de nuestros socios. Estamos participando en diferentes eventos internacionales, como este evento, el año pasado en Mexico Carbon Forum. También participamos en la Semana del Clima de RCC. Tuvimos 2 eventos de alto nivel en la COP28 en Dubái, y este año también esperamos tener otro evento en la COP29. Y con la capacitación técnica de este año, como tenemos todo la América Latina que está representando, esperamos reclutar más miembros todavía en este evento.
Thank you. This is a really helpful website, and I feel like more people should check it out. Again, if you're interested in going into Design Elements news from Chile, from Quebec, from Panama, from Querétaro, right? Like, this is very easily accessible. So I'm glad you had a chance to just share about the CPA, because sometimes I feel it doesn't get as much attention, but it really should. And hopefully that membership grows. There's a lot of time and effort that has been put into it. So we're running out of time. I want to do a mini lightning round, specifically Eduardo and Sebastian. But are there any questions in the audience? If you do have a question, just put your hand up so I can see if we need. All right. Are there any other questions? Okay. And nice. You're both located across from each other. Okay. So quickly we'll go here and then to the questions from the audience. But Eduardo, lightning round. Quickly on the voluntary carbon market and Mexico, and how you have seen more recently uptick, not uptick. What does it look like, the voluntary carbon market, but also as pre-compliance? opportunity for some of these compliance systems, allowing especially the taxes using offsets. And also, I want you to make sure you tell us about Guanajuato in August. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you very much for that. Well, voluntary carbon market in Mexico, but it's mostly a pre-compliance market for many companies that are looking into the ETS and forthcoming carbon taxes locally. So what we're seeing is more of the same. We see a much more fragmented market in Mexico. Most forestry projects under the reserve, under Climate Action Reserve's protocol that qualifies for Mexico, the only country in Africa, together with Guatemala. Hopefully the reserve will also expand its protocols to other countries. And a disclaimer, Katie and I serve on the reserves board, but we need to disclose that. So that section of the market, which comprise a large portion of projects, is pretty well demanded from buyers in the U.S. So prices have grown steadily now with CORSIA and ICVCM news and so forth. Prices from the Reserve Forestry Protocol, they've been pretty much going up during the last couple of months. It doesn't happen the same with other kind of offsets, at least locally in Mexico. So what's going on? It's something quite unusual in Mexico. Most Mexican offsets are sold abroad, while for compliance or non-compliance offsets from outside Mexico, mostly Latin America, which is an opportunity for countries such as Colombia, are being more and more sought and more demanded by local Mexican companies. And that is something that will happen in the future. Mexico is per se married to the US. So, I mean, we're so close to the US and our economies are so much linked. And a footnote, Mexico is largest and most important commercial partner of the US worldwide. So our
Canada.
Yeah, sorry, Canada. Sorry, Canada. That's it. Yeah, well, yeah. Now we have that position, and that means that our economies are so much linked, and so many American companies are operating in Mexico that most forestry projects are now being sold in the U.S. And now we have this strategic alliance with California with our forestry protocol that will keep on going. Our carbon market it's a puzzle of different prices and project types. And as a matter of fact, yes, we do have a liquidity problem as all voluntary carbon markets, which means that we don't have transactions every day. Prices need to be renegotiated, so on forth. But that it's less and less a problem. So we see more trading moving forward in 2024 and 2025, and hopefully, if news are good with the ETS, even better. And again, a commercial for everyone. We have our national event, the Mexico Carbon Forum, in August 14, 16. And we will welcome you all in Guanajuato, one of the most important Mexican states, or Mexican China. It grows and grows and grows every year. Together with Querétaro are the two largest growing economies in Mexico. And our event is mostly focused, of course, in our national Mexican market, together with our subnational mechanisms, though we do also cover some Latin America and US and Canada issues that are of crucial importance. This year, we're trying to have the incoming and outgoing on government, and hopefully everything goes okay for that. And we will wait for you guys in Guanajuato, and it seems to be a pretty very good and crowded event we're organizing.
Yeah, it does. It really. If you manage to bring in both the incoming and outgoing governments, Eduardo Piquero, you have reached next level diplomatic.
Bet.
And also really fascinating insights related to the VCM. Really, really interesting, and how, you know, it's evolving, where the demand is, the location, the CAR protocols. I know Amy from CAR is here. Sebastian, quickly, I haven't forgotten both of you. So last time we were together, it's actually Eduardo was with us in Miami, Climate Week, which was huge, the first time ever. And I really, one of the coolest announcements was related to the digital satellites, the partnership with CC35 members. Can you share just a very brief update on that, or any other of those key highlights, you know, coming from Miami? It was such a big milestone for your community.
Hello. Gracias, Katie. Sí, venimos de impulsar el Climate Week Miami. Están todos invitados en abril del año que viene. Por primera vez, un buen balance entre abril y septiembre, cuando está el Climate Week en New York, con mucho más foco en América Latina y el Caribe. Y anunciamos en medio del Climate Week, como dice Kate, estamos con el World Economic Forum Nature Positive Cities. Anunciamos el programa, un acuerdo con 3 niveles de satélites para crear el Global Forest Watch de las áreas subnacionales protegidas. Green Watch va a ser el programa que va a estar democratizando el acceso a la información de la pérdida de áreas subnacionales protegidas, específicamente el segmento de áreas subnacionales, que hoy no están mapeadas en el mundo. Hay zonas grises, hay un montón de gobiernos que justamente el mercado de carbono va a hacer que empiecen a priorizar las áreas subnacionales protegidas. Creo que hay un incentivo, y la agenda del 30x30 se tiene que volver un gran incentivo para que gobernadores y jefes y jefas de Estado de gobiernos subnacionales vayan a la meta del 30% de áreas protegidas. Eso se puede hacer perfectamente, y los mercados de carbono se empiezan a transformar en el gran incentivo de que los gobiernos subnacionales protejan áreas propias. Como les decía, no en todos los países se puede, pero los países más importantes de la región, por temas constitucionales, además lo pueden hacer. Así que hay una oportunidad enorme ahí. Y nosotros creíamos que había que visibilizar las áreas subnacionales protegidas del mundo. Este acuerdo con 3 tipos de satélites, con Satellogic, con Aurora Tech y con Air Daily, lo que generan es, por primera vez se unen todos los satélites privados a trabajar juntos, porque en general compiten. Y en un programa que tiene que estar abierto, una plataforma que tiene que estar abierta al público para poder ver qué está pasando en el tiempo más real posible, la pérdida, la deforestación y la pérdida de áreas que deberían ser protegidas por ley, y que la adicionalidad generalmente del mercado de carbono decía, no, pero si ya están protegidas por ley, ¿por qué necesitamos cuidarlas? Porque se perdieron millones y millones de hectáreas, se están perdiendo. Bolivia es uno de los grandes casos, por la soja, por la coca. Hoy estamos perdiendo una cantidad de áreas protegidas enormes, y las áreas subnacionales tienen mucho menos control. O sea, la policía nacional, si hoy no tienen recursos los parques nacionales para poder proteger sus áreas, imagínense las subnacionales. Entonces, hicimos un trabajo con todas las compañías de satélite, lo anunciamos en el Climate Week Miami, como dice Katie, con el fin de tener 3 layers de satélites, uno que pasa todos los días y es el más barato, porque era muy caro estar haciendo esto. Fíjense que cuando se hacen las metodologías de mercados de carbono, de los proyectos, se usan datas gratuitas de los satélites anteriores. Entonces era importante también empezar a producir data mucho más en tiempo real. Aurora Tech, Air Daily barre todos los días al kilómetro cuadrado más barato posible que existe en el mundo, son canadienses. Aurora Tech son los alemanes, que son los que tienen la capacidad de detectar las alarmas de fuego más rápidas del mundo, 3 minutos. Y el calor, finalmente nos dimos cuenta, porque incluso en la deforestación, ustedes lo deben saber en sus regiones, los que los que están en territorio. Cuando cortan los árboles, incluso las bases las tienen que quemar. Entonces, como las tienen que quemar, se detecta por el calor también. O sea, incendios y detección termina siendo la gran detección de la deforestación. Y por último, si se detectó esas cicatrices que ustedes pueden ver, perdonen que no traje las imágenes, pero entre el 2020 y 2024 pueden ver las cicatrices en varios lugares, en Colombia, en Bolivia, en Brasil, obviamente, en varios lugares donde a la velocidad que se está deforestando es increíble. Creo que no hay mejor inversión en este momento que invertir en conservación y en la agenda del 30x30. Ya estamos tarde para la descarbonización. Necesitamos proteger las áreas del planeta cada vez más y en eso creo que los gobiernos subnacionales tienen que tener un rol muy, muy importante.
It's so cool. It is, and I got a chance to, when it was launched, and meet some of these private satellite companies and coming together and making that publicly available. And when you are geared in the way we are around carbon markets and data and MRV, monitoring, reporting, and verification, and digital, you're just the possible power, positive power and impact of this and the use, and it's coming CC35 with all of those members and those leaders, government policymakers across the region. I mean, wow. So I'm really glad that we found time. We didn't find time for your questions, I'm sorry, but you know the speakers and you can grab them after. But we do have to wrap. But I want to thank all of you for bearing with the English speaker as your moderator. I appreciate it. But more importantly, for your insights. This was really a spectacular panel, as I thought it would be. Subnationals go. They're important, they're critical. It's where a lot of action and innovation occurs. I want to thank, obviously, my team. I have to, AIDA, the incredible team in AIDA, and especially shout out to Camilo, who is right there. So plays point on all of AIDA's Latin America activities. We couldn't do it without Camilo and obviously Pedro as well. And Aso Carbono again, Francisco, and the lovely Anna. Thank you so much for all of your precious support, and enjoy the rest of the conference. So round of applause for all the speakers, Eduardo, Felipe, Beatriz, and of course, Sebastian and Stefano.
Qué gran panel, qué gran espacio el que acabamos de tener. Katie, muchas gracias. A nuestros panelistas, muchas gracias. Lo bueno es que aún queda gran parte de la jornada del día y seguramente también se pueden acercar a los panelistas para resolver algunas de esas inquietudes. Muy bien, ya también se acerca la tercera plenaria. Antes queremos invitarlos al desarrollo de esos espacios de diálogo que tenemos hasta las 5:30, porque a las 5:30 justamente será el espacio de las comunidades, hablando justamente de esos o de esas experiencias que nos traen expertos y partes claves para discutir el significado de una transición justa para las diferentes comunidades y los desafíos de desarrollar salvaguardas integrales en diversos contextos. Así que muchas gracias por hacer parte de esta agenda y nos encontramos aproximadamente en 2 horas nuevamente con la tercera plenaria.